Thank you, Riff, for joining in this conversation
Thank
with
you for
Asia
having
Biz
me.
today.
Absolutely. It's great to be here and great to be talking to media through the region. It's because there's so much to talk about.
Right. So now NRF APAC coming up for the third year. So what's new this year?
Well, I think it's the first thing is there's been a transformation in the project. We're having tremendous growth, but what's the really big step change, I think, for me is in the first edition, it was a celebration of all things Asia Pacific retail for North Asia, for Southeast Asia, for Pacific, and obviously for India. And what transpired last year is we all of a sudden became a meeting point for people all around the world to do retail in Asia Pacific. So we had over 70 countries attend last year. So for us this year already, the show is really becoming an international show. We're obviously the majority of our constituents are coming from Asia Pacific nations, but we have such a huge number of people coming from outside. And that's the big step change. In terms of the show itself, there are some really interesting things. We piloted the NRF APAC CEO Club last year, and that proved incredibly successful and really resonated with leadership around the region. And so when we look at what we're doing this year, that will grow, and we're going to add more parts. And Bain have taken a sponsorship in that. Our floor is growing, so we've grown from 1 floor to 2 floors of Expo in Marina Bay Sands. We'll probably have close to 300 exhibitors. Last year we had about 230. So there's a big growth there. And I think then programs like the Innovators Showcase are growing significantly, 35% year on year. So there's lots of things happening and growing, and we're seeing, a real energy towards the show that, for me, is, this is a fantastic project. But the people that are joining the cohort and the movement we're creating is what's really transforming the show.
Right. So Asia Pacific retail market is also growing phenomenally over the last many years. So where do you see, this show and the market, growth in tandem?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of perspectives you can take there. Obviously, there's just amazing growth in Southeast Asia. India's GDP is operating at 6.5%, contributing probably 10% of the world's growth. Obviously, China's huge, but Indonesia is really emerging as a country now. But when you look at the growth and the energy in the market, it's sort of happening in two sort of, I suppose, dimensions. The first dimension is this huge wealth creation. And we talk about this every year. By 2034, 3.5 billion people in the decade will join the middle class. And the wealth that's been created in the region is just fantastic. And there's an equalization going on around the region. It was different. It's now coming much more closely aligned. The second thing I think that's probably the most exciting, and it really started to sort of reach into people's view and their line of sight for the future, is really the next generation of shoppers, the Gen Zs. And the Gen Zs are digitally led. They have a different way of shopping. They love physical retail. But I think for me, what's nice about Asia Pacific is it's so diverse that in some markets already, Gen Z is the dominant retail demographic. And so in the Philippines, Indonesia, which are younger markets, we're seeing those behaviors play out before anyone else in the world. So we're actually, in a way, setting the path and that trajectory. So really that growth piece is really about the huge wealth creation and this emerging next generation of dominant retail demographic, which is the Gen Z.
So you mentioned about Gen Z and the digitally native generation that we are seeing now.
Yeah.
So how is that kind of having an impact from your experience over the last 2 years of NRF and the way retailers have been trying to kind of reach out to this particular segment?
Well, I think for me, this demographic is more connected, mobile-led than ever before. And one of the things you're seeing with this demo is that they love physical retail, but for them, physical retail is not about discovery and decision-making. The retailers are now that are presenting content in market, which helps discovery, helping Gen Zs choose the retailer of choice. Gen Zs they are so digitally connected, they're so capable of discerning content that what you're seeing is they almost feel buyer's remorse. They're not rusted onto political parties or loyalty schemes or brands anymore. They feel it's almost like their obligation to do that research. So retailers in our region have to be very good at producing content. So those brand choices are being made by Gen Zs before they enter store. And what happens is We talk about brand choice being made and discovery being made online, but brand journey starting in physical retail. So how that manifests in physical retail is, retailers are really upping their game in terms of the in-store experience, because at that time, the Gen Z, that shopper, that digitally connected shopper, has made a brand choice, and now it's about delivering on brand promise. So you've got great examples throughout the region. So from SM Supermalls in Philippines, I talked to Stephen Tan, the president. They're creating spaces, but they don't know what they're for yet, because it's about creating experience. It's, the mall is the center of culture, food, family, entertainment. It's not just a transactional shopping experience. You look at Fair Price and their store of tomorrow, that whole experience is a deeper, richer grocery experience than what was 5 years ago. And then you think about Baby Bunting in Australia, which has just reformed the whole. Baby Bunting is a shopping for maternity babies kids up to 3, and their store of tomorrow concept, it costs them 1.7 million to refit out a store, and they're getting payback within 3 years. It's incredible. So there's a real desire to be having these wonderful brand experience. And then you go to the extreme, Gentle Monster in Seoul, and they're treating their customers like audience as opposed to customers. So it's about dwell time. It's about in-store wellness with design and lighting, not focus on the transaction. So this is the step change. We've got this brand discovery and decision-making happening at the front on digitally. Then we've got this amazing immersive experience. And then we've got post-visit store online purchase. And the retailers that are connecting that journey up are doing a really great job. So we had Love Benito last year, and they talked about no anonymous transactions. We've got Mecca in Australia, who have got the largest beauty experience in the world from a retail point of view in Melbourne. But they're still finding that, they're getting a huge volume of sales online because people are going to have this wonderful experience. But the transaction online is where the transactions occur.
So in all this, in terms of building up the whole customer experience and value chain, has the cost of customer acquisition for retailers really shot up?
It's hard to say. If I take a step back 2 years, 3 years, say before AI was center of our attention, search was a huge acquirer of customer. And what we saw then is this huge surge in competition. And so it's an auction, so the price was driven up. So therefore the cost of acquisition went up. But that in the last 2 years has just changed immeasurably. People have moved from SEO to GEO, if you will. So they're similar principles apply. So what you're finding is the landscape's changing. So I think that if you're looking at customer acquisition, if you're not tracking where the consumer is and hanging on to legacy systems, which is now SEM, search engine marketing, you're probably overpaying. I think that transformation piece and following that consumer through means that you're no longer spending whole bunches of money on being found in search. You're probably moving some of that money to being found in content discovery. I think the cost of acquisition, the models, I can't change. The pools of customers are finite. But I think for me, right, if you're not chasing that customer in the mediums they are, then you're not cheapening your customer acquisition. And I think that there's a lot of reward right now for first mover, if you will, because we go back 3 or 4 years and we talk about programmatic media and cookies. People were buying cookies and that was driving the price up because there's only a finite part of the market where using other identifiers. So I think you've got to keep moving, because if you don't keep moving and you stay in the legacy environments where traditional customer acquisition occurs, you're fighting against the remainder and the price goes up. You've got to keep moving and looking, and that ability to keep evolving and innovating with your marketing spend will maintain your levels and can in a safe region. So therefore you've got parameters that control your costs, because it's just so competitive now.
You rightly touched upon the subject of AI and in terms of search. So how have you seen retailers cope with this? Because obviously, the GEO that you mentioned about, there's still no clarity about how do you really kind of show up in searches.
Yeah.
So what are retailers typically?
Well, I think the nice thing about GEO in terms of, and I'll talk about GEO, a lot of the main SEO principles apply. You're just becoming richer in the way you deliver content, because GEO is smarter at actually discovery and then indexing and presenting your content back to consumers. But I think from a retailer point of view, there's a few layers for AI. I think first of all, and in this region, if you're dealing with Gen Zs, then from the point of view of thinking about, they're already there. So if you're not there to meet them, you're going to miss them, right? So you must be thinking about that from a content discovery piece, that content piece I talked about before. But then from AI, whether it's Gen AI or whatever it is, the conversation happens at so many levels. It's actually happening at meeting the consumer, whether they're using AI, you're using AI to best deliver your assortment in retail, in store, or on this website. But then it's about, well, okay, cool. There's some magical things that are happening back office, whether it's managing supply chains, de-risking supply chains, managing inventory, managing sourcing to meet market demands. All those things can be really tidy up and be really clever. And for many retailers, holding stock means reducing margin, and so their ability to use these tools well to create efficiencies in their business. So they're not holding huge amounts of inventory. They're better able to predict the future based on what's happened in the past. I think that's really, really important.
So coming back to, APAC, you've been doing these, as part of the event, you do the tours around some of the retail outlets in Singapore.
Yes.
So are you doing it this year? And what has been the, last 2 years, the reaction to it? How have people received it?
I think the tours have been received really well. I think for me, at the end of the day, I don't think it's about discovery Asia Pacific retail. It's discovery of Singapore retail at an Asia Pacific show. And what I mean by that is every person who comes into this market is facing a market that's different to their own. So an Australian might come into Singapore and go, there's a lot of similarities because the markets are much mature. But if you're coming in from the Philippines, then there's going to be difference. If you're coming in from India, there's going to be difference. So you're coming in from China, there's probably going to be difference. So from my mind, it's actually about finding those nuggets, finding those clever pieces of things that are happening in the Singapore market that you can take back to your market, and quite often take back to your market at a much larger scale, because Singapore's quite small. So this year we're focusing very much on Marina Bay Sands and the experience in there, because we have this wonderful venue and this wonderful asset. So what we're finding is that we're becoming more focused on those stores within that precinct. That's been refinement over a number of years. I think for me that ultimately those tours are aspirational. They're tours about where we'd like to take our retail experience. And we're very, very fortunate to be in the Marina Bay Sands, where there's such magical retail experiences happening all the time, every day.
Any new marquee participants at this year's edition?
What we've found is we've managed to attract, from a delegate point of view, attract constituents right across the region. This year, we've had huge increase in Chinese retail numbers, which is really exciting because we've done a lot of work up there. So those sort of things have been really good. We've had really good number growth from Indonesia. So it's more about penetrating the region. We had representation from the region, but we haven't had complete. So for us, we're growing in Korea. It's been a new market for us, which we've grown in. China has big numbers this year. So if you look at our delegate list, our Chinese numbers are huge. We've got really good Indonesian numbers. And we've got really good numbers from the Philippines. So from a delegate point of view, that's great. And that for me is, if you're a retailer coming in, if you want to do collaborations in the Philippines or in Indonesia or China or with those retailers, there's probably someone at the show now that you can meet with. And that's a lot of core of what we do. In terms of the elements, I talked about NRF CEO Club. Innovators Showcase is growing 35%, so that continues to grow. We're going to have an NRF APAC partnership lounge this year, and we're working hard to bring in the associations who are in the ecosystem and actually give them a platform to scale within our context. There's lots of really cool things happening in the region with associations. We're going to do that this year. And that's really valuable too, because if you're a retailer coming in and you want to meet with the Japanese Retail Association or the Singapore Retail Association, you can come into the partnership lounge and go, I want to expand my retailer business in your country, in your market. How can you help me? And the pillars of all of these associations is to grow their retail footprint, grow the retailers that are operating in their marketplace. So that's great. I think, as I said before, the big change is we're 3 floors rather than 2 this year. So that's exciting, So that's a demonstration of confidence. Machin and I were talking, and we cover off tickets and registration. Our registrations are 4 to 5 times this year, last year. We were a bit nervous about obviously what's happening in the Middle East, but we are in the numbers we're seeing in registration are fantastic. And so there's a really strong energy towards the show. And that's, and that's not just our region, but it's Brazil, it's Europe, it's North America. So that's really exciting as well. But I think that ultimately people make events.
Right. And in terms of technology, particularly when it comes to physical AI, are there any specific showcases, any new trends that are going to be on display there? I mean, we've been seeing a lot of China displaying a lot of humanoids doing a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So anything
Yeah,
around?
so I think for me there's probably three layers. Obviously the AI is itself, but I think we're going to see some interesting stuff happening in robotics this year. I know certainly that our friends at Fair Price are really invested in that area. And so some of that task-driven robotic stuff we'll see play out in terms of probably some hardware as well, which is exciting. I think that 2 or 3 years ago, everyone was trying to get their house in order from a data perspective so they could really take advantage of the opportunity, which is AI. I think a lot of the retailers are starting to conquer that now. And also to the inputs, which are very much mobile-led, are creating a great context for that. So I think we're going to see AI go from aspirational use cases to real use cases, and we'll see them working in people's businesses, whether it's dealing with the customer, organising. But I mean, for me, that sort of bleeds nicely into our theme. So our theme this year is the next now, and the emphasis of that, the next now, is what's today, what's tomorrow, what's in a week's time, what's in 3 weeks' time, what's in 3 months' time. Because retailers are flat out trying to deal with the challenges of today, but they need to be agile enough to be able to take advantage of the opportunity that presents itself in the next 24 hours, the next week or next month or next year.
So as somebody who's kind of sitting on the fence deciding whether to participate as a delegate or a retailer at this year's edition, I mean, what would you?
I think there's a few things, there's a few layers to it. I think what we haven't talked about yet is the conference. And so that conference is, we're really fortunate. This year we've got the president and CEO of LVMH coming down to speak at open our keynote. We've got the CEO of Scott Price, the CEO of Fair Price speaking, Stephen Tan from SM Supermalls. So we've got some incredible speakers from around the region. Good example last year with India, that people were like with quick commerce, and that came through with presentations from people like Big Basket. So the conference is really strong. I think that, you're going to walk away something. And I think too, with the scale of the Expo increasing, to have, close to 300 exhibitors, if you've got problems in your business, there's nowhere in the region that's going to have a scale like this. It's going to have a group of people who can solve those problems. So I think for me, what's exciting is if you're trying to make a decision, well, if you've got a problem in your business you need solving, it's more likely than not that NRF APAC will have the answer. Someone have answers to your problems, and that puts us in a very unique position. So if you were to choose us to attend, I mean, that's the piece. Everyone's got challenges in their business, but given the scale and the number of solution providers from all over the globe that are coming, including the Innovators Showcase, this is the place where problems get solved and businesses move forward.
Great. Wonderful, Reef. Thanks.
Thank you, Biff.
Pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.